and welcome to What Crime Is It? I am your host, Cassidy, and today we are following the crime line of the Sherri Papini abduction case from 2016. The 34-year-old mother of two vanished while on an afternoon run in Redding, California, not far from her home. The details of this case continue to baffle law enforcement and have been a source of much speculation amongst online truth seekers. I was completely transfixed by this case, by the cast of characters, by the speculation, and the amount of questions that still remain to this day. To help me unpack this mystery are my co-hosts, Anne-Marie Donahue and Krystal Scruggs, both coming to us from California. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Welcome. Good to see you both. And thank you both so much for your hard work on this case. I know we were talking about this and both super fascinated by so many twists and turns. But what I really thought was interesting, Krystal, is that you are actually from the area or grew up not far from where Sherri was abducted. Is that right?
That is correct. I was born in Redding, California. My family is my mom and her siblings, and they grew up there pretty much. And I was born there, and Mercy Hospital, which is like the number one employment place there in Redding. And I lived there probably, the first couple of years of my life. You know what I mean? It wasn't really, I didn't grow up there. I moved to the Bay Area, but our ties are still there. I have an aunt and uncle that still live there.
And you had an interesting insight on the case because of that, because there were some sort of things about the area itself that were sort of questionable when it came to Sherri's background. And you were saying that you were going to do a little bit of digging about that by calling cousins. I mean, you had this interesting sort of ability to call people who live there and find out what they thought about the case. And so, yeah, tell us.
So, well, to that point, my uncle and aunt, they live in Redding, grew up there, everything. So they have, long ties there. And I talked to my uncle about it, and just said, we're going to do this. We're going to, discuss this. I remembered it very well when you brought it up. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this because the woman was not only from where I was born and my, family was raised, she was found literally like right near where I live in Yolo County, which is literally like 10, not even 10. Yolo County line is literally 5 minutes up the street.
Wow.
I work in Davis, which is Yolo County.
Wow.
So she was found really close, so it was really like, oh my goodness, all these connections, I talked to my uncle and, everybody has their own thoughts and, their own actually solutions. And even though there is no real resolution, the locals, my uncle said, they have their own thing kind of going on with it. And I know we'll later talk about the case. I could talk a little bit more about his thoughts on that when we get down to that. But there is a lot of speculation from the locals because of the situation, how it went down, like where she was. And, being a local and being from around that area, the areas, you can kind of be like, well, wait a minute, someone something happened down the street from your house and you're like, this little suspect. You can't say that it's not, the case, but
people had said, not to interrupt you, but people had said, even as I was researching the case, there were lots of neighbors that said things like, if she was there, I would have seen her there. Or if what happened, if what she said happened, somebody would have noticed because of X, Y, and Z. So yeah, to your point, I did see a lot of that from the neighbors in the news and stuff. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's exactly what my uncle said. That's the first thing he said. You guys. He was like, the locals, we just where they said it was happening. He said it's open, it's nothing where you can be hiding around, again, we're kind of, jumping into it, but there was a lot of speculation just from that fact, and then the players that become involved, which we'll talk about later, but, it's just so much room because there's just no resolution and they really have done nothing for the last 4 years on it, and so, and all the locals or anybody really knows is what you hear from the inside, right? It's a small town. Redding is very small. Okay. Yeah. It's really small. It's very, connected. I know they were in a small, suburb area of it, but as of 2019, there was maybe 92,000 people total, that lived around there. And then their little, where Sherri and, her husband, everything, they lived in this mountain gate.
Yes.
100 people, you know what I mean? So it's really not as populated, so.
And his family lived there. I mean, he grew up in that house that they were living in. So people knew the families. I mean, this was, they went to the same high school. So what did you find out about Sherri?
Okay, so Sherri, found a little bit about her background. You know, Sherri was born June 11th, 1992. Gemini, so that might play a role for some people. And, you know, I just want to say, I throw that in there.
That's very interesting.
I have some thoughts about Geminis, but, you know.
Me too.
So, you know, from everything that I've read and, you know, been trying to find out, you know, they're growing up, she seemed very close. You know, the family seemed very close-knit, fairly normal, you know, nothing out of the ordinary when you're looking on the surface, you know, anything like that. She was supposedly a good student, good grades, you know, played sports, you know, all of these things, you know, it just seems like this small town fairy tale type of life.
Right. Sheltered, maybe even a little sheltered.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And I mean, and being a small town, you're isolated, really. You know, Shasta County, it's huge, but it's, you know, you're isolated and you don't go outside of that. You don't go outside of that. You know what I mean? The demographic is 90% white. Oh, probably 8 to 9% Latina. Okay. 1% African American.
And what's the crime like in general? Is it sort of a safe community?
Well, Redding it's like a meth and heroin town base.
Really?
So the crime rate or anything crime related is mostly around drugs. Okay. And it's the meth capital, dude. And
really?
Heroin is huge. It started growing in 2015. So that is mainly, they have a huge problem because it's not, you know, there was a boom, when it was first, you know, incorporated, there was a boom, the lumber industry boomed it, you know, they annexed and connected with another town. So, you know, brought a little bit more things going on. Retail came in. So it was booming for a while. But then lumber industry went down, you know, things started falling off. Right. The town's, you know, a little depressed, right? A depressive type of state. So, and small. So what, you know, we all know small towns and they cook meth, girl. They cook meth.
Well, you know what I mean? And you know what it is. It's like they need, it's almost like they're looking for something like a distraction. And these, it's a lot of times these little towns where the people get into trouble because there's nothing to do except for drink or do drugs and party. And like you said, start getting into the drug, cooking. Cause there's also very private communities too, right? Correct. So you can get away with it. No one's really checking on you like they would in a more major city. Interesting.
Right. And, you know, and being tight knit and things, they're not going to let things really come outside of that town, you know. And I was speaking with my uncle again, and you know, he referenced about, you know, he's like, there's this one location bar, where near the woman lived. He was like, yeah, I would have to drive home a different way because there's no way I was passing it and not stopping at this local bar. You know what I mean? It's just they're connected in that way. You know what I mean? That's just what it was. And so, you know, things got out of hand. That's a way for people to make money as well. Right. And
was there any talk about her being involved with anything like that? Was she ever into drugs?
Absolutely. Okay. So you know, I found a little bit about it because I was like, you know, it just seems such a, you know, interesting, you know, story. Right. And I right away see all type of, you know, just holes and not things really making sense. But, as I was researching more a little bit about it, you know, again, she's a fairy tale town, et cetera. She, however, I did find that Sherri has had a drug problem from young age, prescription pills, and nothing corroborated with respect to meth or anything hard like that. However, in her past, she's had the opioid issues. Okay, she has problems with her mental health. Could be because of the drugs. Who knows? Or it could be that she just has
vice versa, right?
Exactly. And she was, I think from what I'm reading, and if it's a true thing and, you know, it's going on, her family tried to protect her. I see that now. Right. But she broke into her family's home. She would break in. She was thief, larceny, all type of stealing, busted in, kicked in the back door of her sister's home. Oh my God. Stole stuff from her dad, was in her mom's home. Apparently harming herself and blaming it on her mother. And you know what I mean? Just a little bit of kind of wacky behavior. And then I go on to read a little bit more, like people who, went to school with her. So then, stuff starts coming out, right? Like you have this fairy tale, this blonde, blue-eyed chick, right? The epitome of
Yeah,
America, right?
yeah,
People
totally.
are very swayed by that, which is very
Oh,
interesting to me.
right.
But
And
they still
again,
are
which
very
is,
swayed by this. That's
of
one reason
course.
I think people don't believe that
Yeah.
this girl would go off and lie like this. However, her background kind of indicates it's a strong possibility that something was
Right.
going on other than what we were told, and which we weren't told a whole lot. So
No,
that's another
we
reason it's
weren't.
told.
And so to stop you there, it's interesting because I read a little bit too about how her parents at times had to call the police on her and that they accused her of stealing, that they didn't necessarily end up pressing charges all the way,
Correct.
or they protected her in the end. I think that they probably wanted to try to teach her a lesson. I mean, who knows? I'm not in
Yeah.
their head, but you imagine that a parent maybe doesn't intend to put their child in jail, wants them to understand that their behavior, there's consequences for their behavior. They will call the police. They, if at the very least, scare them or embarrass them.
Yeah. That's
But
it's their wits in, these
of
parents gotta be,
course,
right?
no,
You're
you
calling the
can't
cops on
blame
your child.
them.
They never pressed any charges, right? So there is something in that. There also is the fact that, out there speculating she'd been to rehab. So she's been having these problems with drugs for many, many years. Again, the prescription drugs. And this is, you guys, coming from apparently a family member of hers, and Keith's, who remained anonymous. Now, all these boards and things, and they supposedly family members or anybody close to somebody that they're discussing is supposed to be vetted, like, okay, you got to go through this. Are you really real? All the things. But I got two different things. This person is supposedly verified family member. And then I heard from another source it's quasi-verified. But anyway, this person went on to say that, Sherri has always had problems with drugs and her mental health. She did all of these things that, there are police reports about it. However, no press charges, press, stole money from her daddy's account, all of this stuff. Online selling bags and shit for $1.
Yeah.
This is crackhead behavior. Do you hear me? And I say crackhead loosely.
No,
but,
and somebody who obviously is listen, sometimes it's like, yeah, you're addicted to drugs, but sometimes you're addicted to excitement, drama, being bad, whatever, like just getting into stuff. If you feel like you need some sort of stimuli, you need to be distracted from sort of the boredom of your life. Sometimes that's the addiction too, I also heard that she had a eating disorder. Did you read about that? That she was,
what? Yes, I did. I read about that. It's a reading disorder. I mean, she's very, very, thin,
very slim,
very, very thin, like already very small, young woman.
Yes.
And I think that again goes along with her issues. She's got, mentally issues, and then the drugs that she was taking, what I mean? If she was on these, opioids or speed, and then apparently, okay, let me go back to the drug use. She was, getting help. Her parents, they put her in rehab, I'm sure, a few times, right? Especially kicking indoors and shit. They never pressed full charges. They took care of it, right?
Did they ever discuss where she went? Was that ever documented anywhere, or just that she was put away? Got you. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't find anything, more concrete on that.
Yeah.
But, the family said that, she went to the hospital. So basically that's that rehab. Okay.
Like detox or some sort of mental health, something.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, the girl was down deep because they're kicking indoors and stuff, you know what I mean? She had stuff going on. So she had that. Apparently she was clean as of 2014. Okay. 2 years before this stuff happened. So when the incident happened, the family member said they thought she backslid and she was on something else. And this is what was going on. And she got connected with some wrong people. Again, we'll talk about that, I know, further.
That's what I'm starting to think as well.
She married someone else.
How'd she meet him?
She met him. You know what? I think he was a local as well. They didn't even say, they kind of just say the man, they say, David Dreyfus. They don't, they say they were connected in some way, and it doesn't specify, so I wonder. Right. Like, so 2006 in January, they filed for marriage license. June of that same year, they were married.
She would have been very young at that point, right? How old was she in 2006?
She was,
24 probably around.
Something like that.
If she was 34 when she went missing in 2016,
so she was 24.
Then she would have been 24. It's very young.
20, well, she got married in June of 2016, so she was 24. I don't know if she was married before her birthday or after, but it was June. So she was either 23 or 24 when she got married to David.
Okay.
Apparently the the marriage didn't work out. There was problems soon after. They separated, her and David. Where I'm stopping is that they were divorced pretty quickly afterwards. She was with, Keith, and then we leave it from there. And that's 2000, what? Six, I think seven. She was already done.
Right.
And I'll pick that up.
So very interesting. And we will. Annie's going to pick up the story there, but I have a couple things. It's interesting because, I sort of, I was really obsessed with this case when this case happened because, again, like anybody else, I'm a young blonde girl who goes running, and I lived in California, right, at the time. So it was like, any young girl who goes running, whether you're blonde or not, but when you see somebody that like not looks like me, but is sort of your age and you guys are like kind of in the same area and it's the same lifestyle. And I can't tell you the amount of times that I've thought to myself, gosh, you go hiking or you go running or you go bike riding or you go walk your dog. And I've always been very kind of conscious about where I'm going because you do hear about these stories and you are a single woman on your own. So every time one of these stories would happen, I would be transfixed by that because again, was a young woman, walking outside and she vanishes and she's not the first, and she's certainly, it happens to people of all ages, all sexes, all races, all everything. And, like you said, she's blonde, she was pretty. And of course the news is particularly, hopefully it's changing a little now, but it's even in 2016, they still love to focus on, the Barbie doll, sort of, right. Cause the whole country gets right. And the whole country gets interested in that. But I always sort of was fascinated because, again, like she was doing this sort of activity that many of us do in California. Very common to see a young woman by herself running, hiking, being alone on a bicycle. There's another one right now, this Suzanne Morphew, who's now gone missing, who went bike riding, right? So you hear about it. You constantly hear about it. The girl on Long Island, we'll cover that story too. There are a million, thousand, trillion ones that we can cite. So
there were a couple of women also around that time, right? That went
missing.
We'll talk about that later.
And we'll talk about that. But so there was, and we'll get into that. But what's interesting about her is that, there's all of this sort of, like you said, there is a first impression that you get when you see this blue-eyed, beautiful woman with these two gorgeous children and this, husband who's very handsome and obviously very much in love with her. She's got a nice house and they live in Northern California. And now she's missing. And you start to think to yourself, well, that's terrible. What a tragedy. And then you start to realize that just because something looks a certain way on the outside doesn't mean that her life has been perfect, that it's been without issues, that there isn't something else to maybe look into. I'm certainly not blaming her for a crime that was perpetrated against her. All I'm trying to say is that, I think that we automatically assume something about somebody by looking at them and just make, well, they're this thing, so they must have been doing that. And it's like, or she looks like this, so she couldn't have been doing that. And so the more that you sort of find out about her background, you realize that this young girl had issues. She had emotional issues. She had mental issues. And who knows, sometimes, I have family that is in, that for many years worked in the recovery field and talked a lot about how a lot of times alcohol abuse and drug use, it's because you're trying to medicate something that's going on with you that you start to sort of abuse these substances, and then it turns into an addiction and it further exacerbates your mental issues, right? Sometimes it's not that, you did drugs and that's why you have mental issues. Sometimes it's that you were suffering and you were trying to self-medicate and you were trying to just feel better. And then before you know it, so there could have been things going on. See, I told you my dogs are barking.
Okay.
You hear them? They could have been, it could have easily been, the whole time there could have been something going on with her. And I think, unfortunately, parents don't know how to deal with it. It's, your child is acting out. They're having all of these problems. You want to help them, but at the same time, you want it to go away. And I'm sorry. I find it very difficult to believe, unless she had some kind of crazy spiritual awakening, that she completely was a different person by the time this thing happened in 2016, that she wasn't the same girl, and the only thing that I will say, and then we'll move on to Annie, is, and I'll mention it in my section when we talk about a little bit more about the crime, but I did notice there's a bunch of news, things that you can find, stories and also video, ABC, whatever. But there was a particular news clip where Sherri's sister and Keith's sister were together being interviewed when they were doing the vigil for her, when they were releasing balloons or they were doing like a candlelight vigil in the town, and they interviewed the two of them. And it was just a clip. And it was the newscaster sort of saying, what would you say to Sherri right now? Like if she was watching, and the sister just said, we just want you to be safe. We just want you to, come home. We want you to know that we're looking for you, whatever she said. And Keith's sister, if you look at her, and I'm going to put the link to this below so people can find it. Keith's sister looks like that's effing big. That effing big.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's all in her face. And I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but I'm telling you, the sister is like, please, I'm so worried about you. And the sister-in-law is like, and they go, what about you? She goes, we just want her to be safe.
Yeah.
Yes, total straight face too.
Yeah. So you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me. That was like, oh, and something I may not have noticed back then when it happened, right? But now you go, oh, look at her face. Now I see it. And Annie, about Keith in particular, the first time around on this thing, I wondered if he wasn't necessarily maybe in on everything that sort of was happening. There was a lot of, of course, conspiracy. But once you start looking at things with a little bit more of a discerning eye, and you're trying to remain, not super emotional about the story, but just, try to get the facts. I really started to see somebody who was very much in love with Sherri and actually maybe knew that maybe what I was seeing was not necessarily somebody who was in on a scheme, but maybe deep down knew that she had issues and could possibly have been involved in some way of her own disappearance, not intentionally, but just some way. Maybe that's what I was seeing, but but based on everything that I've recently rewatched and read, he seemed very much in love with her. Is that what you got in your research?
That's what I got. That's my gut instinct. I'm titling it like The Hopeless Romantic. It's how I'm reading Keith a little bit when I'll talk about his background. But, he has a naivete about him. And even some of the neighbors were saying like, this man was coming around asking us about his wife, like as if she was the only woman alive.
Right.
And they over and over again, like the sister-in-law, like he treated her like a queen. Now with, naivete comes a bit of denial. So I think, he probably did like, she's so deep in, I'm not sure how to handle it. Yeah, I'm going to do this drug with her, that kratom. It was somewhat verified on Reddit, verified user. So they both did this kratom. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, people say kratom or they say kratom. I believe it's kratom is the way to say it.
And it's an herb.
It's an herb. Yeah.
And then you can make it into an opioid, like very addictive substance. So that's my impression. Well, should we talk about Keith now?
Oh, go for it.
So Keith Papini. So it looks like he wasn't born in California. I think he was born in Colorado. So it says his older sister was born in Boulder to Kenneth and Pam. Those were his parents. He has an older sister, Suzanne, who we'll talk about. She's 2 years older. Okay. And then from what I read, it looked like he moved to Shasta Lake, California, Shasta County, when he was like 5 in the house that he grew up in. And so I was reading about, same thing, the population of Shasta Lake, which is, when they say Mountain Gate community, it's actually, he's in Shasta Lake, but it's right there. Idyllic lake, you rent boats, you sit by the water. So Kenneth, it said like when they bought the house in 2017, from Kenneth Papini, it says Kenneth Papini and his ex-wife, Kathleen. So I tried to dig deeper, but it looked like perhaps he remarried again. It looked like they lived in Colorado, they moved to California. I couldn't find much on the mother Pam, but I'm going to assume she lives in Colorado just from the little deep diving that I did. But I looked up Shasta Lake too, population 10,000, 10,240, same racial makeup, about 87%, 90%, 4.8, it said here 4.4 Native American, 6.8 Latino, 0.72 African American. Median income in Shasta Lake is $26,275. So,
oh wow, so not a wealthy community.
No. It's definitely no.
I think you always assume Northern California people have so much money because you know about San Francisco, but you forget.
Once you go in, I feel like once you go in there. Oh yeah.
Let me say something about what before Redding was even named Redding. It used to be called Poverty Flats. Okay. So before it came in and had any type of, lucrative aspect to it, it was poor. It's,
interesting. Okay.
Poverty Flat, you said? Poverty
Flats.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so their house is really kind of off the main road, as you know, because we talk about the crime, but a humble home, two-story house, and it's the house that he grew up in. And so, and he, by the way, he got his associate's degree at Shasta, I think it's Shasta Community College.
Okay.
In administration of justice.
Wow.
What he got his degree in. However, he has been working at Best Buy since 2005.
Okay.
So that's like when he was about 22. So Keith is a year younger than Sherri. So they were actually in different grades when they met in middle school, which we'll get to. So he's actually, during the time of the crime, he was 33 and she was 34.
Okay.
So they met when he was in 7th grade and she was actually in 8th grade. And they apparently they shared this kiss. Yes, they shared this kiss. And I'm sure they were friendly before, but the big deal is she wrote notes to him as an 8th grader to a 7th grader. Yeah. And I don't know what the notes say. However, in ABC, the ABC 2020, they talk about it. And so they meet up. So Keith starts, they go to different high schools. He goes to a different community college. It sounds like she leaves town for a little bit and does some other things, according to her blog.
It could be. That could be when she met the new husband.
I think so. Yeah. And so then she runs into Keith in town in 2006. And they connect right away. And so he asks her out on a date. So they go out on a date. They had a great date. And the next day, Keith calls her. And then, according to her blog that she wrote, she said, I asked him out on the second date. And get this, she's like, I wanted to make it a surprise for him. So she went down to the docks, Shasta Lake, because there's all these docks. And she had a candlelit dinner.
Oh my God.
Ready for him. Date 2, guys. Date 2. And he shows up with the box of notes that she wrote him.
Oh my God. But wait, was she married? Was she married? Well, was she married at this point?
Yeah, she was still married or separated.
Right, she was separated.
She was married.
The crossover happens.
Okay, but she was. But was she living with him, or were they?
It sounded like she had her own apartment. She said she had her own apartment in, I wrote down the street, but she has this little apartment in the town that she lived at, a townhouse, excuse me. I think it was called Duluth Circle.
I always am so, I mean, this is so judgy. And listen, I'm always so judgy, but here's the thing. It's so quick. Like some women are so quick to just really jump right back into something. Like the fact that she's so quick. She needs to be connected with a man. She needs to be married or hooked up or have a boyfriend or whatever. It's like she's, the ink isn't even dry on her divorce. It hasn't even started, I know. And I just feel like she's already kind of like getting very romantic and very serious right away with somebody else. I just find that, all of these little things to just sort of add to her profile as far as I'm concerned, sort of where her mind is at, Yeah.
I would say typical addictive behavior in the sense.
Right.
Yeah.
It really is. It's kind of textbook.
Good point.
Really is. So Hopeless Romantic shows up with notes. Now, if I were to run into a guy from grade school and he presented me with notes that I wrote him, I'd be a little freaked out. But some people, such as these 2 folks, love it. She loved it. She loved it. She was like, it was so cool. We kept these notes. Date 3, she was like, we were together every day ever since. And they move in. So she has this little townhouse she lives in that he moves in with her.
Wow.
They live there together for 2 years before they move back to his childhood home.
Okay.
So they live in this little townhouse, 2006, pretty soon 2007. And then so her birthday, as you know, is very important to her, right? She loves her birthday. She loves to be adored.
She's very narcissistic.
Well, that's what I'm seeing.
Because anybody
that, right? So the idea that this is so interesting, right? Because the idea that she would like love the fact that he kept those notes for so long. To me, right away, I thought to myself, oh, somebody who needs to be adored. And then you just said that, but then also, right? I go missing and everybody freaks out and is so worried, right? That's the other sort of like profile of somebody like that.
Yeah, classic narcissy, in my opinion.
Wow.
I don't mean to put judgment out there, but I feel, again,
I get it. Interesting, though. Interesting.
Yeah. So they move in together like quite quickly, within like 3 months or something of meeting. They move in together. Then, so 2008, her birthday, it's again June. Is that what you said, June?
Yeah, June.
Right. So he has a big birthday weekend planned for her in Las Vegas where his mother comes, and then they meet her family who lives in Vegas. They go to Cirque du Soleil. It's wonderful. She's like, it was the most amazing birthday. And then they go back to Monterey Bay. So apparently Monterey Bay is also their place where they like to their place where they go to every year. This has only been like 2 years, but that's where they go.
Right.
So he, so he's like, I'm going to treat you to a massage, get a massage. And then we have a wonderful dinner I have planned at a very nice place. So he picks her up, brings her to the Ritz-Carlton.
She's like, for him, she's just like, she is just like the ideal. Like for him, it's like, she's the dream girl and he's really just getting his dream come true.
Yeah. I apologize. I said Monterey Bay. I meant Half Moon Bay.
Half Moon Bay. Okay.
That's really far. I was thinking.
I know. I was like, I'm like, Monterey's really, I thought that too. Yeah.
Isn't it about Monterey? Half Moon, or am I getting my?
Yeah, no, it's close. I was just thinking, but for some reason I was like, oh, Monterey.
Half Moon Bay. Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
And so there is a Ritz-Carlton there. So they drive up. It's Ritz-Carlton.
Wow.
And they get reservations in like 15 minutes. But he says, "Wait, let's go outside." So they go outside by the water, and apparently there's a gazebo. And he reads this 2-page letter to her on how much he adores her and I love. This is where I'm saying, like, really, he's like, he really adores her and loves her. I'm not saying he's like Mr. Innocent, but he really is Mr. Naive. I mean, I really think he adores this woman to the 10th degree.
Yeah, it's like some guys just really feel, especially if you think about this, right? She really, how do I say this without sounding awful? Like, you look at her and you can imagine a girl that looks like that in a small town. There aren't probably a ton of them running around, right? Who's like blonde, very pretty, really good skin, really like fit, thin. He might be into that. So it's like that sort of suburban, dream girl. And for him, it's like she's a catch and a half. He never left the area really.
Yeah.
And like working at Best Buy, which is cool. I'm not trying to even put that down, but I'm just saying his life is very sort of regular and normal. And to him, it's like he's got this girl that he is probably, and the fact that he kept the notes forever, he's probably been in love with her this whole time. Who knows,
That's
right?
What I think. He's been in love with her, and then we ran into her. He's like, oh, Sherri.
But you know what I think is interesting? I also was thinking as you were talking, Annie, the fact that like, and this is another thing. So when you are married to somebody and the two of you break up, it's really interesting to me that the ex was just like, I'm out. Like I like that he right that he just like never. And when they interviewed him when this whole thing, he was like, I literally have not seen her since like I moved out of the house. Like I don't talk. And there aren't too many men who are like that out of there. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like
he was like
maybe he's going to try to work it out. Maybe he hung around for a while. Maybe like, he was a little bit of a problem in the beginning of their relationship, but eventually no. Like the day they broke up, he was like, I'm leaving the state.
Yeah,
and actually, I dodged a bullet. Like I'm out.
Yeah.
And so it does make me wonder, like, what on earth would make a guy just totally like bounce the way that he bounced?
Yeah, I know a good friend. He was married before he met my friend. Barely ever hear of this ex-wife. Same, and she was apparently crazy. And so I think that's all signs lead to. I think he was like, I'm out.
Like she was a nightmare.
And I mean, again, nobody's like fully innocent, right? So maybe this man like didn't know how to communicate.
Yeah, who knows? And again, there really isn't like specifics about. It makes me crazy. Like I wish.
Yeah, there's nothing.
He really is like, that's the past. I don't speak to her. No reason to bring up her name. And then this
you don't want to be involved.
He's
connected.
And he wasn't trying. And he wasn't trying to get her back, which is
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's telling.
I think so. I think, because I know Mark, like, even if Mark and I broke up, you know, and it was like mutual and we were, you know, I know that if I started seeing, listen, his ex started seeing somebody right away after they broke up, and he broke up with his ex and really never wanted her back, not to put her down either. Like, you know, things happen between people. It was like they were moving on. Like that was it. But he was hurt, like that she moved on so quickly, even though he didn't want her back. And there's no sign of that with this guy whatsoever. Like that there was even like a comment about the fact that she had moved on so quickly. No one says anything about that, which really leads me to believe that he was like, good, put your attentions elsewhere, please.
Yeah.
So much.
And this simple, naive man, she got the best. And they kind of look similar, little Ken and Barbie, when you look at the engagement photos.
Absolutely.
She's gorgeous. And
try to make that little fairy tale.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, couples, sometimes they look alike. And in this situation, I would say they look similar. Similar. Sometimes you like your mirror. You want to look at
looking at that. I'm just saying. For a minute, I was everyone look
up. Maybe we should put, you know, their photos. You can look at their engagement photos. I mean, they're quite lovely. You know, they said, oh my God, it looks like, you know,
Ken and Barbie. It does.
Ken and Barbie, and like even like a Vanity Fair layout, you know.
I don't buy that shit though. Any pictures, I don't buy stuff like that.
No. And
but
the other thing about that
all they're showing are those pictures of them. We know that's not all the pictures y'all got.
Oh, but I don't know about you guys. Anytime that I ever see a photograph of her in particular, there's a little bit of like a faraway look in her eyes.
Yeah, you know? He's not there.
It's not. There's not a lot. But you know, sometimes that's just somebody's personality. But like, you know, in light of all of the information, I've always even back when I didn't know anything about this case and just knew a woman was missing, I remember thinking, there's just something kind of vapid about this person and a little bit far away and a little bit like not being honest. There's a little bit of dishonesty here, and I'm not sure what it is. I mean, listen, you know, especially when you start to think about the fact that, like, you know, this is a guy who's going to take care of her. This is a guy who is going to like move heaven and earth for her. I'm sure that was an attractive, you know, proposition. I also think that, like, you know, he's a good looking guy. He's a nice guy. He's going to take care of her. And, you know, he looks good with her on his arm and sort of, you know, vice versa. But I really just think in the end, you know, she's just looking kind of for a place to land, and she knows that he's going to really take care of her. And like, there's probably nothing that she can do that's going to make him leave, which he's already proven to be true. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
she gets kind of hip to that probably after a while. It's like by the time you're on your second marriage, you start to realize like, I need somebody who's going to like just absolutely adore me, because I need to know you're never going to leave. I need to know that no matter what happens, no matter what I do, whatever I say, that you're going to be by my side. Like you're not going to, and I can kind of get away. Because that's the other thing too, right? It's easy to get away with stuff when somebody's just looking at you through rose-colored glasses. You know, she probably could do a lot of things that he wouldn't have any idea she was up to, because he's not wrong.
He's a classic enabler, which is what somebody like her needs. So I mean, I feel, you know what I mean? Like she met this guy. The girl ain't stupid. You know what I mean? What comes with the narcissistic personality, she's a little bit of a predator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was her prey, and she got him. And he is happy to be got. And that's the thing.
That's the thing, is that he feels like he got a catch.
He wasn't fucking around like that. So he was like, bye. Because
the other thing too,
I think she got a little bit of.
So maybe like in her defense too, not necessarily her defense, but just one thing that I also thought about was, I come from a small town myself. I come from a town where people tend to stay in the town. They tend to raise their kids in the town, and they marry each other. Like you marry people that you went to high school with. It's a very common thing. And it's more of a sort of upper middle class community. And it's a lot of it's both. It's college educated people and also people who have made money like in trade. So like a lot of builders, construction, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. But, you know, nice homes, good school system, you know, people have kids, usually 2 to 3 kids. But I remember thinking to myself, like, I had met a guy that I went to high school with who wanted to go on a couple of dates, and we'd known each other my whole life. And I did go on a couple of dates with him, and I will always love him. He'll always be my friend. It didn't work out romantically for us, but I remember thinking to myself, there was an instant comfortability being with somebody, especially somebody like me who's been all over the place and has dated guys from everywhere, right? There was an instant sort of comfortability with somebody who grew up in the town that I grew up in. there was nothing to be explained to him.
Mm-hmm.
He knew exactly where I came from. He knew my people. He knows my background. There was like a safety in that. And in some ways I can understand, like if you've dated somebody who's not from your area and then you meet somebody who is from there and he's known you your whole life, he's seeing her still as that little like 8th grade girl.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
And she probably liked the way that felt. I can understand that for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, she would write in her blog like, he adores me. I fall in love with him more every day. He treats me like a queen, basically.
Right.
And they get married in 2009. So by the time this happens, they've been married for 7 years. They have 2 kids, cute, adorable children. Tyler is 4 at the time, and Violet, who's 2.
And they they ended up buying the house from his parents, right?
Yes, that is after the whole crime. That is the most interesting fact. The house is worth $128,000. They buy it in like April 2017. So there's all this speculation.
But they were living in it. Were they renting
in it? Yes. And then they bought it outright in 2017 from the father.
Interesting.
That's
family
interesting. They had been living there. Yes. So after the townhouse, they lived there for 2 years. So basically 2006 to 8 when they got engaged, then they move into the house, the big house.
Right.
And they live there. And they've always been there. And then they apparently just bought it outright in 2017, which is a whole nother conversation on the internet.
So it was a Wednesday, and the kids got dropped off at daycare. There's no real, I'm sure that like any mother needs a break during the day. If she wants a break a couple of times a week, you drop the kids off, you go get your nails done or go grocery shopping or clean your house or go visit a girlfriend, whatever, go to the gym, So for her, she took a run. She was actually training for a Thanksgiving Day race. You hear a lot about these Turkey Day races. They're very common. And so she was training for one apparently. And about 2 p.m., she put on a pink running top and her sneakers and she went out for a run. She went with her iPhone and her earbuds, and a person driving past reported seeing her wearing the pink top and jogging alone on Sunrise Drive, which was not far from her home. At about 6 p.m., Keith returned home from work. He saw Sherri's car in the driveway and expected the usual sort of bum rush at the door that he gets from his kids. They go running through the door, Violet and Tyler. They will tackle him down to the ground. He called it family snuggles in his interview, and it's something that happened every single day. And so he expected that when he opened the door, except when he opened the door, the house was empty. It was quiet, which was definitely unusual. He called out, but he got no response. He went inside, he looked around, he went up into the bedrooms and still nothing. He thought maybe they're outside, California day. Maybe they're outside playing in the yard. Maybe they're somewhere, in someplace I didn't notice when I pulled in. So he looked outside and still nothing. So this is where I took a pause because I found this a little bit odd and I had to think better of it. And it's not even necessarily trying to make him a bad guy, but he immediately opened up his iPhone and did a Find My Phone app.
Yeah.
And obviously, like many of us, myself included, we have family plans. Mark and I are on the same plan. People who are married are on the same plan. Families are on the same plan. So you have something called a Find My Phone, and you're able to open up the app, and it'll basically track whatever phone that's on your plan that you're looking for. So he immediately opened up this app. My thought was, because he told this story himself. This is not third hand or second hand. This is directly from his mouth. He immediately opened up his phone and did the Find My Phone. Why wouldn't you call her first?
Exactly.
Why wouldn't you even wait for a minute and just be like, well, maybe she'll be back in a minute. Maybe she just like ran to the neighbor down maybe she took a while. Immediately trying to track her, right? Yeah. So my initial thing was, obviously he's paranoid about her, or else you wouldn't do that. I also found it a little bit controlling. And frankly, with all of the information that we have about how kind of obsessed he was with her and in love with her, as the subject of that, as the recipient of that, I would find it so annoying if I had a husband or a boyfriend that like needed to know where I was so badly at every moment of the day that the minute he finds I'm not home, he's going to track my phone. Like that kind of a personality, that kind of a relationship, I can imagine after a while would be grating. And who knows if she didn't feel that way after a while, just like, God, it's like, he's just so obsessed with me. Like I love him and it's so nice, but my God, it's like, give me a break. So to me, I found it to be a little bit of a weird response on his part. So he does this thing. He does the Find My Phone. And he sees that they're down near the mailboxes. And you had mentioned that he lived on a private road. And for those of us that grew up in the country, you know that there's a lot of these where there's a private road and maybe there's a couple of houses back there, or maybe there's just one, but the mailboxes tend to be on the main street. And sometimes it's, a walkable distance. Sometimes it's a mile away. Kind of depends on how far down that private road goes. And it turns out that his mailboxes were coupled with other people's who also lived down the private road. And it was about a mile away. So he hopped immediately into his car and he went down to the mailboxes thinking that Sherri just went down there. Maybe they walked down there together as a family to go get the mail. And of course, when he got there, they were not there. So at that point, he picks up the phone again. He calls his mother and says, "Did you speak to Sherri today?" His mother had not. Then he calls the daycare and he said, "What time did my wife pick up the children?" And the daycare said, "They're still here." Okay. Now I know what you're thinking, because you're thinking what I'm thinking. Why did the daycare not call him to begin with to say your children usually picked up at 3:00 and they're still sitting here at 6? First of all, like that's completely bizarre to me, and totally now, unless they were flaky about what time they picked up the kids all the time, that the kids maybe on Monday get picked up at 3 and on Tuesday sometimes they could show up at 4 and maybe sometimes they show up at 5 and maybe sometimes they show up at 6. It's very unusual though for that to be the case. And most daycares won't allow that.
Their ass too.
Well, most daycares would have a set time that you come and get your child. Like there wouldn't be this sort of haphazard way of going to get your kids. So that didn't raise any flags means one of two things. Either the daycare was negligent or they were used to Sherri being negligent, right? It can only mean one of two things. It can't mean anything else. So the fact that they didn't call, I just thought was completely bizarre. But here's the other thing that I thought was bizarre. So if he put on the Find My Phone app in the house, now he's at the mailboxes. Isn't it telling him that the phone is very close to there? Why would he then call his mother and call the daycare? Wouldn't he be
finding the phone, right?
Well, because the signal at this point is showing him where the phone is, and the phone is about 50 yards from where he's standing. Yeah. So I found that to be strange. Again, this is all from his mouth. This is not secondhand. This is all, and I'll put the link below. This is all in the Matt Gutman interview, ABC interview. He tells this story himself. So now he's looking at the phone. Obviously, the Find My Phone app has showed him where the phone is, but now he's calling his mother, according to him, and calling the daycare, according to him. This is the sequence that he did this. I don't believe this sequence. I really don't. Apparently, according to him, at this point, he gets back in his car, does another drive around, sort of probably just the periphery, whether it's like down the dirt road again. But I'm thinking to myself, when you pulled in, wouldn't you have seen them on your way in if they were at the mailbox? Like, wouldn't you have thought to yourself, well, if they're at the mailbox, I would have seen them. I just pulled in. I just drove by there. My kids and my wife are not there.
Right. I don't know. I call the phone.
Or like, just wait a minute. Like, why are you so quick in a panic? And why do you feel the need to control her and control the situation, control where she is and control it's just
enabling, because I think, she's not
that's
not an isolated incident. That
I think he's showing the signs of somebody who is paranoid, right?
Yeah, so, paranoid and enable. He knows, oh my God, my wife is like a complete wreck, and now he's paranoid. Yes,
right.
There's paranoia means no trust.
Exactly.
Paranoia equals no trust.
Exactly.
That's why he's tracking her phone, you guys. That's the tracking aspect. That's why he got it on there in the first place. The first thing he did, that's because you do that all the time because this woman be missing.
Yeah.
Those places you don't know where she's at.
Well, your instinct isn't to think to yourself, because even Scott Peterson, who killed his wife, even he, when Lacey wasn't home, waited. He told the police, whether he did or he didn't, but he's like, I came home, Lacey wasn't there. I waited a little bit. She wasn't back. I called her mom and I just said, hey, is Lacey over there? Is she with you? Like, that was his first instinct wasn't to track her down or track her phone or be worried, right? That's what he said. Even Scott Peterson, who's a complete sociopath. My point is, I think that Keith's response to me was of somebody who immediately thought she took off, like immediately thought she's gone, right? Yeah. And I think my boyfriend wouldn't do that. My boyfriend might call. He might even track my phone just because he's young and loves technology, but he wouldn't immediately be like, she's gone. Like, it wouldn't, he would he'd wait till I came home. He'd try my phone. He'd be like, where you at, baby? He'd text me and be like, are you at the store or whatever? I got home from work. Where are you guys? but it wouldn't be this like instant, like, and then I got in the car and then I went to the mailboxes and then I drove around and then I called my mom and then I called the daycare and then I called, right? There was this automatic assumption that she was gone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure enough, he comes back to the mailboxes. He drives back around and now, for whatever reason, notices the Find My Phone pinging, the Find My Phone thing that he had put on supposedly immediately. So I think that's very strange. He starts walking or driving toward where it says the phone is. It's very close by to the mailboxes. It was vague. He either drove to it or he walked to it, but either way, it was walkable from the mailboxes to where the phone was. And on the side of the road, he found the iPhone with her headphones, just the sort of little earbuds that we all get that come stock with the iPhone, apparently strands of her hair tangled up in the iPhone cord. There's stories about the way the iPhone was found, etc. But that is what was waiting for him right there. We're going to leave it there in terms of we're going to save the rest of it for the next episode. But there's a lot. And I know that we've touched on a ton of it already, but there is so much more to this case that happens after the fact. And many of you know about this story already. But there's, a little bit of background, a little bit of digging to do, and a little bit of speculation. And with all of this time that's gone on, there's been no resolution whatsoever to what happened to this girl. There are suspects that she put forward. There are all kinds of people that came forward to help that are super interesting. And then, of course, there are Keith's, interviews and his behaviors and the families and the things that they said, the things that they didn't say, the things that she hasn't said. And the fact that the police have not really held her feet to the fire in terms of what happened to her, unless they know as well. The other thing, too, that you have to think about as well is, here you go, right? He's madly in love with her. He's completely obsessed with her. Yeah. She needs that in order to sort of feel good about herself, but also to get away with the things she's getting away with. The thing that she didn't anticipate is that she would pull this and that he would go to the press. That he would turn it into a national story.
Okay, I got to wait for that next one. But yeah, that right there, because I have a theory of what it was all about. Well, we gotta wait for that, right?
All right. So next episode will be part 2. We will get into all of that. We will get into the actual how long she was missing. We will get into what happened during the days that she was gone. We will get back to when she was found and what she said when she was found and actually where she is today. Ladies, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your hard work and your research on this. And thank you everybody for listening. Of course, we're going to put a subscribe button at the end of this. Subscribe if you like. We are on a new channel called Podster, and it's a whole new sort of format with these crime shows, and I'm super excited. Thank you for your support, and ladies, I will see you next time.
All right.
Bye. Bye, ladies.
Bye.